Good morning. The House of Representatives adjourned in Washington for their August recess a day early this past week amid a battle over the Jeffrey Epstein files. This as we're starting to see the impact of President Trump's tariffs and spending cuts. And that's not all people are talking about. Joining us now is my first guest, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes, currently in his 9th term representing Connecticut's 4th District. Congressman, welcome. I want to start with what I said in that intro, that Congress adjourned early for its recess here all the way till Labor Day. There was a lot of talk that was just Epstein related. What was your take on that news?
Yeah, it was absolutely just Epstein related. I mean, I'm embarrassed to report that, right? You would think the Congress of the United States would stick around to do the work that it is, commissioned by the American people to do. But, the dynamic was that the Republicans are badly split. You've got a lot of Republicans who are saying, hey, we've been talking about the Epstein scandal for a long time, saying that the files contained, important people and powerful people's names, and the deep state has been stopping the release of those files. And then you have the president, Donald Trump, and Pam Bondi, the attorney general, saying we're not releasing files. And that has created a huge argument inside the Republican Party, about how to proceed. And nothing could move. And so the speaker finally just said, look, we've got business to do, but go home a day early. I mean, it's just, you sort of can't make this stuff up.
Talking about some of the business that did get done, there was so much talk over the last several months about this big, beautiful bill that was signed into law by President Trump on July 4th. When you think about the effects of that bill in Connecticut, we've now started to see some things play out. I know there's still a lot of unknowns, but if a constituent comes up to you and says, Congressman, what does this mean for me? What are you telling them?
Yeah, the bill's pretty easy to understand, right? It extended tax cuts to the very wealthiest people in this country and to corporations at an expense of many, many trillions of dollars. And it cut, in an attempt to try to keep the damage down, it cut about $1.3 trillion, or it will cut, I should say, about $1.3 trillion from Medicaid and from nutritional programs and from the subsidies that people get to sign up on the exchanges for health insurance. So what it's going to mean most immediately, and by the way, don't take it from a Democrat. Talk to a hospital administrator, talk to a nurse, talk to a community health center. They are going to tell you that they are under stress like they have never been, and that there's some chance they may need to close. When you throw a lot of people off their health insurance, it's not like they don't get sick. They show up in the emergency room and they don't have a means to pay for the care that they get in that emergency room. And so the hospital has to eat it. So, two things. Speaking of eat it, by the way, nutritional programs were brutally cut in this attempt to keep tax rates really low on the richest Americans. And so things like food stamps, things that people rely on to put food on the table, obviously some of our more vulnerable people, for a lot of folks are going to go away. And that means they're spending more money on food, and it's that much bigger of a squeeze to pay the rent and do what you need to do.
Now, a lot of people would respond to those comments and say, listen, President Trump, when he was running for re-election for a second term, he was upfront about saying that these were some of his priorities, some of those tax cuts and some of the changes. Now, he claims the Medicaid changes, gets rid of fraud and abuse and things like that. We see that ICE and DHS is now the highest funded law enforcement agency. A lot of people would say, Congressman Himes, America largely voted for these things. So you're saying that it's such a bad thing for Connecticut, but a lot of people wanted this.
Not really. Not really. I mean, of course, that's what MAGA and the Trump administration is going to say. But remember when Donald Trump was running for president, he said, I will not cut Medicaid. He said that. I will not cut Medicaid. And this bill does massive cuts in Medicaid. And look, we can have a long conversation about work requirements. The reality is that almost everybody, not almost everybody, but the vast majority of people on Medicaid are working, right? We're talking about kids, a lot of kids. And so, again, it's not even a left or right or a Democrat or Republican. A lot of groups that have looked at this have said you're throwing somewhere between 11 and 17 million Americans off of their health insurance. So no, he did not. He campaigned on the opposite of cutting Medicaid, which is what this has done. Waste, fraud, and abuse is a complete nonsensical thing. It's what politicians say when they're lying. Not that there isn't waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, but this is not how you go after it. And, to your point on immigration, look, I celebrate the fact that the border is better closed and that we're seeing fewer people, who we don't know on an undocumented basis coming across that border. But you know what America didn't sign up for? Talk to some farmers. Talk to restaurant owners in your neighborhood. Talk to landscapers. The president promised in his campaign to go after the worst of the worst, the rapists, the murderers, etc. And instead, he's pulling people out of restaurant kitchens and off of farms, creating a huge problem for those businesses. And it turns out, and here's the fact. The fact is that of all the people being held for being undocumented in the United States today, roughly 74% of them have never been adjudicated for a crime. So no, he's not doing what he said he would do. And oh, by the way, last thing he said he would do is keep prices low. Inflation is ticking up. Last month, we saw inflation tick up a little bit. So I would certainly quarrel with this notion that America voted for this stuff.
One thing I know you'd also quarrel with were the allegations that came out from Tulsi Gabbard about the Russia hoax. And the president's spoken about it a number of times in the Oval Office and other places, suggesting that there would be a criminal referral for former President Obama. You had a lot to say about that on Face the Nation last week. I watched the interview. What do you want people to know about that and why it's coming out now?
Well, first of all, let's not call it the Russia hoax, right? It's not really debatable anymore because it's been studied and investigated time and time again that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in a way to damage Hillary Clinton's chances. We saw that with the break-in to the computers of the DNC and the release of embarrassing emails, all engineered by the Russians. That nobody's making that up. We saw the Russians buy Facebook posts and Instagram posts denigrating Hillary Clinton. So look, it's not really a debatable point that the Russians did that, even though Tulsi Gabbard is trying to rewrite history here. And again, don't take it from this Democrat. Watch two things. First of all, read the Marco Rubio report. When Marco Rubio was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he did a unanimous report on this, and that report found the opposite of what Tulsi Gabbard is saying. And secondly, and here's the test. And by the way, I'm going to be watching this closely. When Tulsi Gabbard says something so irresponsible that the former president is probably guilty of seditious treason, okay, bring it on. Charge it. Charge it. Now, you're not going to see charges on this. 2 weeks are going to go by, 3 weeks are going to go by, 4 weeks are going to go by, and it's going to be just like Epstein. They're promising you something that they will not deliver. And why am I certain that they're not going to deliver? Because there is not a court in the United States of America that will look at what Tulsi Gabbard is saying and do anything other than collapse in peals of laughter. So again, don't take it from me. 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, Tulsi Gabbard has leveled probably the most serious charges that have ever been charged against an American. Let's see if they actually try to prosecute it. There's no way they will.
We led into this segment talking about how many terms you've been in Congress. I know we have a ways to go. I don't want to rush election season. They come at you fast anyway. Have you made a decision about if you'll be running in 26? And if so, what's your reasoning or what's your timeline?
Yeah, it's a little early to think about that, right? We're only 7 months off the last election. But my presumption is that I will run again. Honestly, the last 7 months have been trying to play defense on lawless activity by Donald Trump, on trying to stop this bill that is going to so damage our hospitals and our community health centers. And so there hasn't been a lot of time for a lot of us to reflect on politics. But look, if I do run again, I'll put my case before the voters of the 4th District and say, I've been doing my best to represent you in a independent, thoughtful way, standing up against breaches to the Constitution that we see all too often, standing up for women's reproductive rights, and most importantly, doing the things we need to do to try to keep costs and inflation under control in what is a pretty high-cost state.
All right, Congressman Jim Himes, thank you so much for being with us. We'll have you back again.
Thanks a lot.